प्यारी साध संगत जी, गज के फतेह बलोनी। वाहिगुरू जी का खालसा, वाहिगुरू जी की फतेह। एक ओंकार सतनाम करता पुरख निरभउ निर्वैर अकाल मूरत अजूनी सैभं गुर प्रसाद जप आदि सच जुगादि सच है भी सच नानक होसी भी सच। The next 20-30 minutes mainly going to be in English. कि जेह्ड़े अगले 20-30 मिनट वास्ते विचार होने खास तौर पर अंग्रेजी च होनी है, इसलिए माफ करना। And what we're looking at is some of the shaheed and some of the sacrifices made by the saints of the last 25-30 years. We're also going to look at a little bit around the responsibilities that we have today as the current generation in relation to the shaheed things. First of all, I've got a slide here with just a BB's face. And I don't know who she is. I don't know what she's gone through. But I know there's a story behind her. And what we have is, when we talk about numbers, when we talk about 1984, when we talk about what's happened in the last 30 years, we throw around numbers. Some people say 200,000, some people say 250,000, some say more, some say less. These numbers are meaningless. They mean nothing until you start to understand each and every individual's human story. Because just like we have our own families, just like we have our own concerns, our own homes, our own happinesses, our own weaknesses, our own strengths, each of these people also have their own stories. And to start off with, I want to talk to you about two stories. Two stories, the only difference being that these two stories are from 250 years apart. The first story, 250 years ago, would have taken place in Lahore, at a place called Shaheed Ganj, where Sikhs were taken in their families, they'd been captured by the Mughals, taken to Lahore. And Shaheed Ganj basically means the garden of martyrs. And what I want you to imagine is this nameless Bibi who I'm going to talk to you about. I want you to imagine her at this place with her children and her husband. And I want you to imagine that they take her husband from her and take her into the middle of this garden called Shaheed Ganj. Ganj meaning garden, Shaheed being the garden of martyrs. This is the name given to this place in Lahore by the Sikhs. And in the middle of this garden, her husband's pinned down into the ground. Wooden pegs are planted in the ground and his hands and feet are tied with ropes to these pegs. And he's given the choice, Islam or death. And the Sikh chooses death. And this Bibi is watching her husband make this decision. And in Shaheed Ganj, what they did to this Bibi's husband was they took wooden mallets, not metal hammers, metal clubs, but wooden hammers, wooden mallets. And they would have beat his body from the top of his head to the bottom of his toes with wooden mallets, smack after smack, turn after turn, beating him to death. And I say wooden mallets, and I want to make that point perfectly clear, it was wooden mallets rather than metal, because wood takes longer. To be hammered to death by a wooden mallet takes a lot longer than if it was a metal bar. And these Bibi and her children would have stood there and watched. And that's a human story. We talk about our shaheeds, we talk about our martyrs, we talk about our history, but we don't talk about the individuals that make up that history. That was 250 years ago. About 30 years ago. 30 years ago, I have got a name for you. The Bibi's name is Balwant Kaur. What happened to Balwant Kaur? Balwant Kaur is in Delhi around November 1994. And the human story of Balwant Kaur may well have looked like this. I have no idea who this Bibi is. And Balwant Kaur, her house is shattered. Her husband is murdered in front of her eyes. And that in itself is a great loss. But the human story, the human impact of Balwant Kaur that I want to talk to you about is not what happened to her husband, what happened to her children. Two young boys. कि Balwant Kaur के दो छोटे बच्चे नहीं थे, दो छोटे बच्चे। ते उन्होंने सही सोचे शहीद करा का सब कर मेरे Balwant Kaur दे। पर जेरे जो छोटे बच्चे सी उनको खो के जेरी मुड़ीन सी सरकार दी खींच के ले गई। Mob took her two young kids, two young boys. And as happened to thousands of other families across Delhi, these two young boys were killed for being Sikhs. They were butchered. the blood staining the streets of Delhi. But the human story doesn't finish there. The sad and most hurting thing is that when Balwant Kaur went to find their bodies, she found their bodies in a pile on this street, and she found their heads in another street. कि जो बलवंत कौर बच्चे ने लुबन गए कि शरीर लाशां एक गली च पईयां कि दोनों बच्चे दे शीश एक और गली च प्रेतो भी अगे गल सी कातलों ने सिर नहीं वड्डे सर दोनों वड़ के थालियां च टकाए हुए सी कि छक लो शीश बच्चे दे वड़ के थालियां च टकाए हुए सी दूजी गली च जाके आ बलवंत कौर दे बच्चे सी कई बार जो 84 बारे गल्लां करदे हैं लाख 2 लाख 3 लाख नंबर की गिनती सी गिनती की गेम बना देंगे पर ये 2 लाखों एक कहानी एक बंदे की बननी है। जो एक घर में जाके असीं पूछे कि तुहाडे नाल की होया उमरां लंघ जाणियां इन्ना दिल साडा है नहीं जे असीं 2 लाख को जाके पूछे कि तुहाडे नाल की होया पर कुछ नहीं हो रहा। And this is why we have these events, this is why we have programs like this, because these human stories can't be forgotten. The day we stop talking about this, we've lost. The day we stop talking about these martyrs, these victims, these shaheeds, we've lost. And they don't have the voice necessarily that we have to talk about this. They're not in a position to tell their story. So the responsibility falls on us. So 250 years apart, 2 stories, both involving families, both involving husbands, wives and children, both involving crimes committed because of their faith, because of their Sikhi. I'll give you another example of a human story. One family had an 11-year-old boy, and if you're thinking where am I getting these stories from, there's a book here I've got in front of me by Insaf. It's a human rights organisation based in America. And these are all statements made by witnesses who said this happened to my family. It's an affidavit signed as a legal document. And what this one family says is that we had a 10 or 11-year-old boy, and to save this boy's life, they dressed him in girls' clothes. कि 10 या 11 साल का एक बच्चा सी सैनिक छोटा ले उस दिन माता पिता ने की किया कि जान बचाने उन्होंने लड़की के कुड़ियां के कपड़े पा दिए केस खोल के पीछे गत बनती 10 साल के बच्चे को कुड़ियां सूट पाता कि सिंगम तो मार दे या शायद निकी निकी बच्चियों को ना मारन and they're trying to save this boy, trying to get him to run away. But at this point, they'd already killed his father. इस मौके तक जो उनका पिता से उनको सार के मार दिता सी माता कहती सी मेरा पता बच जाए and they made him run down the street to hide. When the mob seen this boy run, first a few of them let him go. They failed to recognise it's actually a boy, but then someone said, hang on, that's simply a boy dressed up as a girl. They grabbed this young boy, took him back to where his father was, threw this young boy's body on top of his father's burnt remains, and then stabbed him to death. कि जरा 10 साल का बच्चा सी उसनों फड़ के ना देखो ना जी कुड़ियां दे कपड़े पाए सी उन्होंने फड़ के खिंच के जिते पिता की लाश पई सी अद्धी सड़ी हुई ਉਹਦੇ लाश के ऊपर बचदा शरीर सट के बारसे नाल उन्होंने मारे। अब एक घर घर की कहानी है इस करके सानू हाँ इस तरह के प्रोग्राम करने चाहिए रखने चाहिए क्योंकि असी ना इन्होंने याद किया ਜਿਹੜੇ पापी है ਜਿਹੜੇ जुल्म करने वाले हैं वो चाहते हैं कि तुम भर के भेजो कि कापड़ थले गल रख लो फिर दिखा पे आए हुए कि जो हो गया वो पुरानी गल्लां क्यों करी जाते क्योंकि जिन्होंने जुल्म किया हम उन्होंने गल पुरानी हो जिन्होंने अगले जाके होर नवे जुल्म करने होंगे जिन्होंने की उन्होंने चेता होंगे। The criminals, the culprits have got more crimes to commit. Those who have had to endure, they don't forget. So this is part of the reason why we have these events. We're here to talk about the Shaheed Singhs. We talk about victims, and I don't like using the word victims because they're not victims, they're martyrs in their own right. They were people who stood up, they were people who were Sikhs who stood up and fought because of their Sikhi, because of their identity, because of their image in the room, they were persecuted and murdered. But we're here to talk about some of the saints, some of the people who stood up and fought against this. And what we see here is the congregation of saints, the Guru's Khalsa, Kathe, Akal Takht Sahib. Because what happens is, if you look at history, every time a situation comes with a bunt, needs sacrifices. महाराज की मौज है जो भी पंथ लोड़ पैंदी महाराज कृपा करके अपने सिंह भेज दिया जो भी लोड़ पैंदी महाराज आप कृपा कर दे क्योंकि पंथ गुरु गोबिंद सिंह जी महाराज का है हाँ कि साडा कि उन्होंने आया असीं उन्होंने बच्चे हैं कि महाराज आप अपनी कला करके सिंह को इकट्ठे करते हैं what we saw in the 80s was the Singhs getting together but this wasn't the first time whether it was against the Mughals whether it was against the Afghans in Afghanistan the Afghans who had invaded India invaded Punjab looted, raped, looted, burnt the villages, burnt the crops, made life unbearable, kidnapped women by their thousands and took them to Afghanistan to sell in the slave markets. Against them, Guru Sahib got his Singhs together. And against them, the Guru Singhs fought, and not only fought the Afghanis, they pushed them back right into Afghanistan and captured vast areas of their own country. 12 invasions we saw through Afghanistan into India, but yet the Singhs got back and took over. Whether it was against the British Empire, perhaps one of the world's greatest empires that we've seen, impossible odds. How can you fight against the British? Yet the Singhs, the Gurus Khalsa, did exactly that. The Gurus Khalsa travelled from a far abroad, America, Canada, Hong Kong, Australia. They actually left their comfortable lives like we're living today here in the UK, and went back to Punjab to fight for freedom. That was a choice they made. The Gurus Khalsa in the form of the Gadar Party, in the form of the Babbar Akalis, Maharaj formed these things together to go fight for justice. And we haven't got time today to talk about their Qurbani or their history. But at time and again and again, Maharaj sings these things together. And today, there's a number of things that we're going to talk about. The thing we're going to focus on is by Anuk Singh Babbar. But there's a few of the things that were mentioned as well. And just very quickly, I'm going to talk about their lives in very, very brief. So one of the things we have on there is Bhai Balwinder Singh Jathana. Now Bhai Balwinder Singh was part of the Khatri movement. He was one of these freedom fighters. And when he saw the persecution, when he saw the atrocities committed against the Sikhs in the world, he couldn't just sit there and take it. He stood up, he picked up arms, and he went there to fight. Now again, it is very easy for me to do these things and talk about these things because that's all I'm doing is talking. Walking the walk is unbelievably more difficult than just talking about it. All we are sound bites. All myself and other people like me is tell you the history. The people that make the history, their faces are on posters because they're no longer with us because they've made the ultimate sacrifice. So Balwinder Singh Jathana was one of these. And Balwinder Singh Jathana was 25 years old when he shaheed. 25 years old. As younger than many of us in this room. But Balwinder Singh Jathana's Qurbani सिर्फ आने सीख रहे हैं आप शहीदी पाई पर उन्होंने परिवार के 4 मैंबर शहीद हो हम वाई दे शहीद क्योंकि बलविंदर सिंह लाते पुलिस उन्होंने घर पहुंची समेत सैनी की पुलिस फुले दी मंडीर and they came by Balwinder Singh's house. They already knew who they came looking for, and at his house they killed his mother, 80 years old. They killed his aunt in her 50s. They killed a cousin of his in the 30s, and they even killed a young nephew, who's aged about 5. एक बच्चा, एक बुजुर्ग, 2 और बीबियां, उनके घर में कत्ल किया उन्होंने. This is just to get to Balwinder Singh. And if that was any of us, we'd have anger. If that was any of us, we'd probably want revenge. इधर बदला लेना है. इन्होंने मेरे बारे में इन्होंने जाके मारने. तो बलविंदर सिंह को देखो. गुरसिख की निशानी देखो. गुरसिख ने की क्या? इन्होंने बच्चे वाले बुढ़िया थे. बीबियां इन्होंने जल किया. खालसा का काम नहीं. जिसे आज साढ़े यहाँ बीबियां वाले बच्चों ने मार दिया. असी इन्होंने नहीं मारना. असी गुरदे सिंह के असी इन पापियों ने मथा होंगे. We will fight their soldiers, we will fight their officers, we will fight their men, we will fight them wherever we have to fight them, but we will not persecute their women and children like they've done to us. Because in anger, it can do many things. But just imagine that, Qurbani. Imagine at that moment, when 4 innocent people in your family have been butchered in your home, and you have the nerve, you have the Sikhi, the Kamai of Sikhi to turn around and say, "Asi nahi kam karna hai." That's Balwinder Singh. Another thing whose fate photo you see in the poster today is by Dilawar Singh Babbar, or by Dilawar Singh Jai Singh Wala. And by Dilawar Singh, as many of you will know, because of Bhai Balwant Singh Ji Rajawana, was the man who blew to pieces Janta Papi, Dilawar Singh was a police officer who served in the police, and at first hand he saw what the police was doing to innocent people. He saw the specially formed torture chambers at the police stations. There's a book by Abdul Singh Jaiji, and in this book he estimates that anything up to 500,000 Sikhs were tortured in Punjab. कि शायद 5 लाख सिख पंजाब पुलिस की तहसील देते हैं, 5 लाख, 500,000 टॉर्चर हुए सारे शहीद हुए, पर 5 लाख टॉर्चर हुए उनकी गिनती दे साहब. I mean, by the Lord, he saw this happening in front of his own eyes. He may have even been party to some of it, standing there watching. But when his mind changed and he realised that the man guilty of all this was this puppy called Beanta, he realised the only way to get to him was to sacrifice his own life. Now, Qurbaniya by Dilawar Singh is unique within the Sikh movement because he was the only one to carry out that act. The Palestinians do this regularly. The Palestinians use this technique because they say this is the weapon of the poor man. It's not necessarily a weapon of the Sikhs, it's not something that we utilised. But in this instance, Dilawar Singh and Balwant Singh found this to be the only way they can get to Beanta. And who was Beanta? What did Beanta do? Beanta, when he came to Punjab, unleashed such a reign of terror. Beanta ne inne Punjab vich kholle ke mama bachche de gas kata diye sige. They cut their own kids gas ke sing na ho gaye. क्योंकि सिंगल मारी अंदर. There were stories of 2 young बीबियां, a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old. They were by a canal, walking along the canal. एक बीबी का नाम सरजीत कौर सी, दूसरा नाम सिकंदर कौर सी मेरे ख्याल. 12 साल की बच्ची, 14 साल की सी. पुलिस ने दोनों चक ली. दिन 2 दिन बाद जब परिवार ने FIR ली थी, सारी बच्चियां निकाल दियां. पुलिस ने कहा कि साढ़े को 2 लाख पर तुम रात में आके पछाण करनी, दिन नहीं करनी, रात में आना, इसी रात में आना. परिवार कहते नहीं इसी सवेर में आना कि रात में की बदला कर. मैंने कह माता पिता को यकीन होता कि मेरी बच्ची की लाश है, जो मेरे पुत की लाश है, किसी को यकीन नहीं होता. वो भी रात में पुलिस कहती हम भी रात में आओ. And what they had was they had the 2 bodies and we must come now, and the bodies of 2 naked young girls in the back of this truck. तो दोनों बीबियां ने कपड़े दे बिना लाशें ट्रक के पीछे रखी हुई थी पुलिस ने. And in the morning, the family identified them as their own. So police ने दोनों निके बच्चे चक के बहुत पहले उन्होंने जुल्म किए, फिर उनको मार के मगर दूसरे दिन नाम लाता सिंगा दे, सिंगा ने मार दी बच्ची. हाँ गल घर होंगी सी. इन्हां गल्लां सुनिया सुनाइयां नहीं, हाँ गल्लां जिन्होंने हुई वो सानू आप दसदे हैं. कोर्ट च करके कचहरी च करके नसाना किदों है, पर हजे तक जस्टिस नहीं हुई. And this is stuff that Beanta was doing. Beanta unleashed the dog KP Gill. इन्हें उन्होंने छड़िया. जरा पुलिस स्टेशन जा जाके पूछा सी कि तुसी नहीं थोड़े नंबर कितने हैं, थोड़ी गिनती कितनी है. ਜਿਹੜੇ अफसर होंगे सी डरते सी कि साड़ी गिनती घट आ, कि जो पता कि कल होना या परसों होना पहले ही गिनती अपनी पूरी कर देंगे सी कि साढ़े 3-4 नंबर फोड़ चढ़ते छेती जाकर 3-4 सिंह मार दो कि साढ़े नंबर बन गए कि गिल ने होना गाला पड़ी. So this is KP Gill, man in charge of the Punjab police. He had targets for each police station. And again on record, between the years of 1991 and 1992, 50 to 60,000 awards were given capturing militants or killing militants. In 1991 to 1992 ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ 50 ਦੇ 60,000 ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਨਾਮ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਨੂੰ ਦਿੱਤੇ ਗਏ ਸੀ ਸਿੰਘਾਂ ਨੇ ਮਾਰਨ ਕਰਕੇ. 100 ਮਿਲੀਅਨ ਰੁਪਏ ਦਾ ਨਾਮ ਇਕੱਠਾ ਬੰਦਾ ਕੀਤਾ ਸੀ. ਆ ਬਜਟ ਸੀ 100 ਮਿਲੀਅਨ ਰੁਪੀਸ. 50 ਦੇ 60,000 ਵਿੱਚ ਨਾਮ ਦਿੱਤੇ ਗਏ. ਅਭਿਆਨ ਦੇ ਰਾਜ ਥਲੇ ਹੋਇਆ ਸਭ ਕੁਝ. ਆ ਸਾਰਾ ਕੁਝ ਸਬੂਤ ਹੈ, ਸਾਰਾ ਕੁਝ ਲਿਖਿਆ ਗਿਆ ਹੈ. ਹੁਣ ਦੀ ਆਪ ਗਿਣਤੀ ਕਿ ਰਿਕਾਰਡ ਲਿਖਣੇ ਪੈਂਦੇ ਆ, अकाउंटेंसी करनी पैंती है. आप कहते साढ़े 50 से 60,000 असी सिंगल मांग करके इनाम देते 100 मिलियन रुपये का बजट. So this is the man that Dilawar Singh sent out. Now we move on to people like Jaswant Singh Kalra, people like Jaswant Singh who wasn't a militant, but people like Jaswant Singh who uncovered the truth. People like Jaswant Singh who uncovered 25,000 bodies in just Amritsar alone. Bodies have been burned. Jaswant Singh came to the UK, Jaswant Singh came to Canada, and Jaswant Singh told the world what happened, and because of this, Jaswant Singh Kalra was picked up by the Punjab police under the orders of KP Gill and also disappeared, murdered, tortured, hacked to pieces and his body thrown away. So these are some of the things that stood up before. These are some of the things that we remember today. But as I said today, I'm talking to you about Anok Singh. So Anok Singh was a Gurmukh. As a youngster, Anok Singh did Sangat by Fauja Singh under the Grey Code 6. छोटे पर तो भगती नाल जुड़े हुए सी सिक्खी की सेवा कर रहे सी and there's loads of stories about them but I don't think there's enough कि जिन्ना को सानू भाई अनोख सिंह होर सिंह बारे पता बहुत थोड़ा है जिन्ना भी पता बहुत थोड़ा है क्योंकि जेरे वेस्टर्न दुनिया च देखो जे इधर हीरो आ एडी एडी मोटी किताबां लिखी होंदियां कि किथे जम्मे सी किथे पले सी की किताब किथे पढ़े सी केरे फ्रेंड सी फ्रेंडा दी कोटा होंदियां कि किदां होंदे सीगे ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪਣਾ ਇਤਿਹਾਸ ਨਾ ਸਾਂਭਿਆ ਨਾ ਲਿਖਿਆ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਆਹ ਉਂਗਲ ਹੋਰ ਕਿਸੇ ਤੱਕ ਨਹੀਂ ਉਂਗਲ ਸਾਡੇ ਨੌਜਵਾਨਾਂ ਤੇ ਦਿੰਦੀ ਹੈ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਕਿਤਾਬਾਂ ਲਿਖਣ ਦਾ ਕੰਮ ਸਾਡੇ ਬਜ਼ੁਰਗਾਂ ਦਾ ਕੰਮ ਸੀ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਵਿੱਚ ਜੰਗ ਕਰਨੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਹੋਰ ਕਿਸ ਨੂੰ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਹਿ ਸਕਦੇ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਿਉਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਕੀਤਾ ਅੱਜ ਜ਼ਿੰਮੇਵਾਰੀ ਸਾਡੇ ਤੇ ਪੈਂਦੀ ਹੈ responsibility for writing history falls on us if we don't capture our history now who's going to do it we can't point out elders are busy fighting the civil war at the time the responsibility falls on us but by Anok Singh showed on this Sikhi jade hoye si and there's a story where one of the Singhs his brother had a baby boy in the prasi in the shode bacha and when he went to see the baby he gave the baby 2 rupees इन्होंने 2 रुपए ਦਾ ਪਿਆਰ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਬੱਚੇ ਨੂੰ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਦੀ ਭਾਬੀ ਵੀ ਸੀ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਉਦਾਂ ਇੰਨੇ ਵੱਡੇ ਸਿੰਘ ਆ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਬੱਚੇ ਨੂੰ ਸਿਰਫ 2 ਰੁਪਏ ਦਾ ਨਾਮ ਕਿ ਚੰਗੀ ਗੱਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਉਹਦੇ ਹਾਸੇ ਨੂੰ ਕੋਈ ਕਹੀ ਹੋਗੀ ਭਾਈ ਅਨੋਖ ਸਿੰਘ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ 2 ਰੁਪਏ ਵੀ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਹੈ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਆਹ ਮਾਇਆ ਪੰਥ ਦੀ ਮਾਇਆ ਹੈ ਆਹ ਮਾਇਆ ਘਰੇਲੂ ਕੰਮਾਂ ਤੇ ਲੱਗਦੀ ਚੰਗੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਲੱਗਦੀ even 2 rupees he said belong to the panth he's the kind of Gurumukh Bhai Anok Singh was his bhakti his nitnem is simran beyond measure and again because time is short I must take you to the end the final days of Bhai Anok Singh when he was captured by the police when he was captured and he escaped on a number of occasions but the final time when he was captured he was taken to the police cell and again I told you earlier on about the human story we talked about how each individual has a story and it's important to know that story understand the story and feel the story deep within us these are not just words ਤੇ ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਸੁਣਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਸਾਖੀਆਂ ਸੁਣਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਇੱਕ ਕੰਨ ਵਿੱਚ ਪੈਂਦੀ ਦੂਜੀ ਕੰਨ 'ਚ ਨਿਕਲਦੀ ਆ ਇਹ ਸਾਡਾ ਕੋਈ ਅਸਰ ਨਹੀਂ ਪੈਂਦਾ ਪਰ ਜੇ ਸੋਚੀਏ ਕਿ ਜੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਵੱਜੀ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਵੱਜੀ ਕਿੰਨਾ ਦੁੱਖ ਲੱਗਿਆ जो सिपाही अनोख सिंह बारे सुनते हैं कि इन्होंने की कुछ होया they had in prison metal bars heated up and hammered through their heels into the shins कि लोहे दे सरिये पहले गर्म करके लाल करके पुलिस ने जेह्ड़ी हड्डियां सी पैरां दी उन्हां विच ठोक के साडी लत्तां विच डूंघाए मुझे साडे पैर ते 60 बजे कितना दुख लगा then got those सरिये then got the metal bars and pushed him through the chest and the belly some say they even pushed one through his skull on the side his shati vich ho sariye kadde sar de sariye kadde not only that one very famous story by Anok Singh was that he would tell torture kar hunda si and what they said to Anok Singh was the go das tera na kiya to kithe hua singha de bare Sudeh Singh bare sanu das aur singha bare das and what Anok Singh said because you see that cup of tea because if you made me drink that cup of tea and then ask me did you drink it I won't even tell you that if you want to ask me about sins because you torture me as much as you want I will drink that cup of tea and then deny even having drunk that because ਤੁਸੀਂ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਪੁੱਛਦੇ ਕਿ ਸਿੰਘਾਂ ਬਾਰੇ ਕਿਸ ਮੈਂ ਚਾਹ ਦਾ ਕੱਪ ਪੀ ਕੇ ਮੈਂ ਆਵਣੀ ਗੱਲ ਮੰਨੀ ਕਿ ਮੈਂ ਚਾਹ ਪੀਤੀ ਹੈ ਨਹੀਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜੋ ਮਰਜ਼ੀ ਪੁੱਛਣਾ ਪੁੱਛੀ ਚਲੋ in the end they're hanging him upside down and at one point they say they took his eyes ਅੱਖਾਂ ਕੱਟਦੀਆਂ ਸੀ ਤੇ ਖੂਨ ਦੇ ਫਰਾਟੇ ਥੱਲੇ ਵੱਜਦੇ ਲੈ ਭਾਈ ਅਨੋਖ ਸਿੰਘ ਨੇ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਕਿ ਟਾਈਮ ਕੀ ਹੈ what time is it ਜਿਹੜੀ ਦੱਸਦਾ ਕਿ 7 ਵਜੇ ਸੁਣਦੇ ਹੋਏ ਭਾਈ ਅਨੋਖ ਸਿੰਘ ਸਾਡੀ ਦੇ ਰਸਤਾ ਪਾਰ उसी मौके हजे अखा कटियां गई इसलिए पाए लोग से उठे पहुंच के अपना रेरा साहब का पाठ शुरू करना at the end of it they say he did ardas at the end of having done his reras he just had his eyes taken out of his skull and endured the most unbearable tortures and he does ardas to Guru Granth Sahib Ji Maharaj he folds his hands and he says Maharaj the day has passed in great peace may the night pass in the same कि सुखना दिन बतीत हो रात भी मार दिन बतीत this is his ardas कि महाराज अपने भाने में रखे कि मीने हुक्म शहीदी बख्शे कि me martyrdom don't let me waver and become attracted to the cause This is the Ardas Bhai Nuksing after having his eyes ripped out. These are our saints, these are our heroes, these are the people that we know nothing about. These are the people this is why we have to have these events. Because this story must be told. Finally Nuksing, because he was doing so much simmering, they didn't like the sound of what he was, so they cut his tongue off. They sawed his tongue off with the hacksaw. Finally shot him dead. So this is one of the men whose face is on the poster downstairs. And this is his story. But again, why have these events? Why have these events? What's the need? And if you look at this picture says a lot to me. कि इस तस्वीर में मैंने बहुत खुश मिला क्योंकि 84 तो लेके हुण तक मेरे ख्याल तस्वीर सानू बहुत कुछ दसदी है. If we just kind of quick look at it, देखने में बहुत सौखा लगता है कि एक सिंह थले गया दस्तार इत्थे हुई है पुलिस वाला तो फरमान मिलता और ये बारीकी ना देखो कई कुछ नीचे मिलता. And this is what the Indian state and the policing authorities want us to be like. आही हाल सरकार क्यों नहीं के साडा होवे की हाल ये थले बैठी हुई है बेचारे दस्तार साडी सिर तो लेके मिट्टी जोन के हाथ चके हुए साडे के सानू मारना अखा चंडार. This is where they want us to be on the floor afraid, having no dastar on our heads, either because we knock each other's off or because we don't have them or because they're worthless, therefore we throw them away, looking up in fear at our persecutors, afraid to speak out, afraid to stand up. कि बोलन तो डर जान, खरन तो डर जान, कुछ करन तो डर जान. And beyond that, if you look a bit further, तेरा थप्पड़ मारना को दो देखो. एक तो है गंदी थप्पड़ मारना, एक पंजाबी कहना कि पुठे हाथ का थप्पड़ मारना. And in Punjab, that's the worst kind of slap you can get. It's complete disdain, it's complete disrespect. That you're not even worthy of a proper slap on the slap with the back of my hand. It's complete disdain. It's like you're not even worth slapping properly. And if you look at the man at the back, वो मुंह देखो बहुत कितना बड़ा किन्हीं उन्हें खुशी मिलती है कि सिंगर के सारा लाख के थप्पड़ बज देना है. This is the state that they would like us to be in. Make no mistake, there is no ill feelings from them in that what we've done is bad. There's no regret. इधर कोई गल नहीं किसी बहुत मारा किता नहीं जी क्योंकि हुंदा रहंदा हाजिरी हुंदा. इस तस्वीर साडी हालत है जां हालत है जिहड़ी हुण चाहुंदे कि साडी होवे कि चुप करके डर के बह जाइए ना कोई गल करिए ना कोई खड़िए कट खा के बस मोरे हाथ जोड़ लीजिए किसी को होर ना कटो. And this is why we have to have these events, because this is the life we want to live. And again, I'm just speaking, I'm not doing the walking, but there are lions out there who walk, lions out there who have walked. And if we stay quiet, if we don't speak out, then where is our dignity? And I've got a few words in there: self-respect, identity, family, self-sufficient, freedoms, love without fear. These are all issues which come within dignity. So first of all, self-respect. कि जेरे बंदे नूं अपने ते मान नहीं आप सेल्फ रिस्पेक्ट नहीं कि मैं सिख हां मैनूं सिक्खी ते मान है तो मैनूं अपने गुरु ते मान है तो मैनूं अपने कैसा ते मान है जे बाणे ते मान है जे बाणी ते मान है. जेरा बंदा समझदा नहीं कि मैं बंदा हूं की करूंगा. हम जो भी देखिए जिथे भी देखिए साडा मखौल बनाउंदे हैं किसी खबास हासा मखौल करन जो गई है या शराबा पीण जो गई है जे लाभ एक दूसरे लड़न जो गई है. असीं इन्नी गल मान के आप कहना पे ऐसे अपना देश तक की चलाना से अपना गोदरे नहीं चला सकते असं आप गल्लां करना पे क्या ढिल्ली कला वाली गल नहीं. इतने गुरु गोबिंद सिंह जी महाराज ने खालसा बनाया दुनिया के राज खाने वाला खालसा ऐसे ही ढिलिया गल्लां करना पे कि साढ़े को गोदरे नहीं चला होंगे क्योंकि उन्होंने साड़ी सेल्फ रिस्पेक्ट इन्नी छोटी करती कि असं मनते नहीं किसी गुरु सिंह ने. आइडेंटिटी, we're afraid of our identity, we're afraid of the dastar, we're afraid of the dari. केस रखो तो डर गए जी केस होंगे नौकरी नहीं मिलनी केस होंगे ब्याह नहीं होने आ हो जू वो हो जू आ सारा डर सारे मना च पाया गया. Family, we know the atrocities that were experienced by the saints. There's a story in a book by Saint Mahmood where she asks the saints, what's your worst memory? What's the worst experience that you endured while you were in prison? And किसी ने गोली से मेरे का तो बीबी इंडिया गई सी ने पूछने गई सी किसी ने कि तो की होया कि तो है वो दी स्टोरी है वो भी तुम दसूंगा पर वो किसी ने पूछे कि सब तो भेड़ी गल तुम केरी चिता व्हाट्स द वर्स्ट थिंग हैपेंड टू यू तो सब तो बुरी गल की हुई तुसी जेल च तुहानूं पढ़दे सी तुहानूं किद्दां तसीह दित्ते and what this thing said to her was it wasn't the torture that they made me endure that hurt me. It wasn't the pain and my flesh that they ripped off my body. It wasn't the blood that poured out of my skin. What hurt me the most was the screams of my sisters who were being raped at the sound next door. Saying that जो मैनू होया ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ नहीं मैनू दुख मैनू उस गल सी जो मेरी भैन नाल दे कमरे च हुंदा सी. This is a family respect. This is a family dignity. Self-sufficient अपने पैरों पे खड़े साडा हक होना चाहिए. So we can make our own living. पंजाब जाके हाल करे हाल होने वाले हफ्ते 3 दिन आप अपने आप मारी जाते सुसाइड कितनी पदवी पंजाब कर जा चक के दे मेड अस क्योंकि असीं अपनी रोटी आप कमा के नहीं खा सकते कितने मान सी सिखाते कि जी मर्जी तुसीं भावें इन्नी जमीन दे दो उस बाह के रखोगे now we're killing ourselves. This is the life of dignity that we wish to live. Freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom of movement. These are all denied to us and are still restricted now. Why? Because of fear. डर करके यह गल्ला सुना हुई है डर करके ऐसे हाँ काम करते हैं. And what's fear? Fear is simply a perception thing. Fear is simply perception. Something which you can do in broad daylight you're afraid to do at night time. Something you can do with your eyes open you're afraid to do with your eyes closed because of the perception that something might happen. Muscle movement, when you walk down the stairs with your eyes open, it's muscle movement, it's natural, it's reactive, you don't think twice. If someone put a blindfold on you, you'd be afraid to fall. Getting rid of fear is simply changing our perceptions. Things like by unboxing Baba Manachal, by Avtar Singh Brahma, and it's done easy. Why? Because मारे में जुड़े हुए से. डर, fear is just perception. So I haven't got much time. दो और गल्लां थोड़ा करनी सी कि संगत दी फोटो लाई हुई है. ले गल करते सी शहीद संगत दी गल करते सी ना कि जिन्होंने जुल्म दा मत्था लाया. Those who stood up and fought against injustice. And where it starts from is obviously Guru Nanak Dev Ji, Guru Gobind Singh Ji Maharaj. But in the modern times, it kind of comes from Sant Jarnail Singh Ji as well. And in picking a picture of Sant Jarnail Singh Ji to talk about, I purposely chose this one. Because to see Sant Ji Loni si mein janbur ke haal hai. Why? Because jo Sant si, Sant A si. Sant kaun si? Sant si Guru Granth Sahib Ji Maharaj de pyare. Sant si Bani naal jude hoye. First and foremost for Sant Jarnail Singh Ji was Gurbani. First and foremost for Sant Jarnail Singh Ji was Guru Granth Sahib Ji Maharaj. Everything else came second. Gurbani was the key to who they were. Gurbani made them who they were. Gurbani gave them that strength. Gurbani gave them the determination. Gurbani gave them that spirit of sacrifice. Gurbani gave them the leadership qualities to drive on and lead the bunt and struggle for that freedom, fight for that freedom. All this came from Gurbani. So if we want to talk about our Shaheed Singhs, we want to talk about our martyrs, we want to talk about what we've been through, we must talk about Gurbani. We must talk about Guru Granth Sahib Ji Maharaj. If we want to talk about solutions, the first solution is Guru Granth Sahib Ji Maharaj. Any solution which doesn't talk about Gurbani, any solution which doesn't mention Guru Granth Sahib Ji Maharaj is not a solution. ये कोई solution ना बदले अगले solution Guru Granth Sahib Ji Maharaj की गल नहीं होगी वो solution होगा. हर एक गल गुरु के नाल होनी चाहिए, गुरबानी के नाल होनी चाहिए. And if you look at Sant, what did Sant do? Sant taught Santya. Sant Ji taught Gurbani, Sant Ji did Katha of Guru Granth Sahib Ji Maharaj and also Sri Dasam Granth Maharaj. And today we have these controversies कि बानी नहीं पढ़नी चाहिए, हाँ नहीं करना चाहिए. We even have these funny situations कि संतां नूं दुनिया मान गई है पर दसम बानी नहीं मानती कि संत उधर ठीक सी प्रेस गल पर लेके सी उन्होंने उदा संत बहुत वधिया सी. आप गल मन च करते जी कि संत दसवीं बानी नहीं पढ़ते सी पढ़ाते सी कथा भी करते सी. Bani is the backbone of who we are. We move away from Gurbani, we've lost everything. And Sant, in creating this movement, did something very unique. He did something very special, he did something very clever. What he didn't do was stand there, do speeches on day one. Day one, they read Gurbani. Day two, they read Gurbani. Day three, they read Gurbani. The first thing they do is become a Gursikh themselves. Having become a Gursikh, they then went out to the villages, they went to the towns, they went to the family homes, and they taught Sikhi. घर घर जाके सिक्खी का प्रचार किया. घर घर जाके एम नहीं इन्ने सिंह खड़े हुए से Why? Because of Gurbani. Pyar Gurbani mein hona chahiye pehla. And if we listen to Sant, there's a speech he does. कि तुसी स्पीच सुनी भी होगी जिस Sant जी मोटरसाइकिल की गल्लां करते हैं, तुहानू पता केड़ी स्पीच है। ले आज भी असीं वो स्पीच सुनते होंदे सी कि Sant जी कहते कि हर एक पिंड च मोटरसाइकिल होना चाहिए। पर मोटरसाइकिल की गल करन तो पहला Sant जी गल करते हैं कि जे सिर वो गुलामी लानी है पहला आनंदपुर साहब आओ। वैसे जे सिर वो गुलामी लानी है पहला आनंदपुर साहब आओ। If you want to remove this slavery from your heads, the first thing you must do is come back to Anandpur Sahib. What does that mean? What is Anandpur Sahib? Anandpur Sahib is Kesgar Sahib. Kesgar Sahib, Kes, Amrit. When Maharaj first blessed the Panth with Amrit. So if you want to remove this slavery from your heads, first come back to the Guru's path. Amrit Shako, Anandpur Sahib आओ, Guru वाले बनो। गुलामी लानी है पहला गुरु वाले बनो। गुलाम इसी से गुरु दा बन रखा। ये दुनियावी की गुलामी साढ़े साढ़े पे ये किधर आऊँगे अपने? ताकत गुरबानी विचों मिलनी है, ताकत अमृत विचों मिलनी है। And yet today we're afraid to talk of Amrit. We're afraid to say to people अमृत छकना चाहिए, गुरु वाले बनना चाहिए, डरते हैं कि गुस्सा ना कर दे कैसे कहने अमृत छको। Sant Ji said, if you want to take the threat of slavery away from your head, first come to Anandpur Sahib, join under one Nishan Sahib, become united as a Panth, join as one Panth under Guru Granth Sahib Ji Maharaj, and have adore Nishta in Guru Granth Sahib Ji Maharaj. Adore something that doesn't fade, doesn't waver, doesn't move, doesn't shake. Nishta belief in Guru Granth Sahib Ji Maharaj. If you want to be free, if you want to live a life of dignity, come to Anandpur Sahib and have full faith in Tan Tan Sahib Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji Maharaj. If we want to be free, we want to talk of solutions. There's a solution. We go to Anandpur Sahib, we unite into the case of Nishan Sahib, and we develop full faith, devotion, pyar, and love for Guru Granth Sahib Ji Maharaj. This is the solution. The saints that we talk about, Anok Singh, Baba Manujal, Avtar Singh, all these things that we talk about, they had this adored Nishta in Guru Granth Sahib Ji Maharaj. Inna pyar Guru Sahib na si. Jeevaniyan padhiye, Bani padhiye, inna kinni Bani padde si. Kinna jeevan si unna da. These are the stories that we have to tell. These are the stories which we fail to tell. We talk of solutions which don't involve Gurbani. Yet Sant Ji and the saints started with Gurbani. Bhai Anok Singh experienced all that torture, went through all of that, didn't scream or shout or cry at once because of faith and love for Gurbani. So again, time is short. What about us? A few questions for us to consider. Is it over? Is it finished? I don't think it is. Because there's a man out there, and this man's name is Sarbjit Singh. And in this book again, Sarbjit Singh said that what they did to me was they beat me, tied me, and then took my pregnant wife in Delhi, in the middle of the streets, raped my pregnant wife and my puppy in the middle of the streets, then threw the body down and poured acid on their bodies. So when people say, is it over? Go and ask Sarbjit Singh if it's over. I'm going to read something out by Balwant Singh Granthi of Kotra BC block in Shalimar Bagh, New Delhi. This is what he said. Ask him if it's over. He said, we don't mind so much for ourselves. I could have been shaheed, I could have been martyred. I don't mind the fact that my house was looted. After all, it was Paramatma Vaheguru who gave the house to me. But what I couldn't bear was that he, Vaheguru, he, Guru Granth Sahib Ji Maharaj, who had given everything to me, should be trampled upon by the looters. That Guru Granth Sahib Ji Maharaj should be insulted and defiled with urine. इस बलवंत सिंह जाके पूछिए कि होगी पूरी ग्रंथी बलवंत सिंह कहने कि जो मैंने हुआ तो चल ठीक है परमात्मा ਉਹਦਾ ਦਿੱਤਾ है एक हर साल के कुछ नहीं होता कि मैनू शहीद कर देंगे पर जो उन्होंने महाराज की बेअदबी की वो ना करते जो गुरु सिखा के घर जाके महाराज की फोटो तस्वीर ला ला के थले सट के मगरों मैंने मारते सी हम थोड़े गुरु की कर लेंगे वो भी जो गुरु जो है स्टेपिंग ऑन द फोर्ट हाउस उन्होंने जाके पूछो जिन्होंने यहाँ गल्लां देखी कि कल होगी पूरी फिनिश है it's not over. What about if he seems lost? This question is the worst question in the world. Maharaj made us capable of fighting Sawa Lakh. Maharaj created the Khalsa Panth, worthy and able to fight Sawa Lakh alone. Sawa Lakh na ek larnu Maharaj ne Khalsa Panth banaya. ठीक है सारा जीवन ना होगा पर बेनती इधर ना गल्ला करिए कि महाराज से कितना बनाने से महाराज से जो मर्जी बना सकते हैं महाराज मौलिया महाराज अपना
बोले सोने हालो
आप कदे ना सवाल पूछे कि हार गए की कर सकते कुछ नहीं कर सकते सरकार जारी बड़ी है गल्ला खास भी लगा दी so what responsibilities do we have and where do we start सारा नौजवानों वास्ते है क्योंकि सारे बुजुर्गों ने बहुत कष्ट किया भावें असीं उन्हां दा मुल पाइए या ना पाइए वो साडी नसीब है What about our responsibilities? What do we do? I said the first thing we do is we carry on telling the story. We carry on making the world aware of what happened. We destroy the sleep of the tyrants. We make sure that their black crimes and their black sins are put there in front of them. Some of the things you hear, some of the things you experience in life, when you look at this stuff, when you read about and research this stuff, is shocking. It's really mind-boggling. Our responsibility is to let that story stay alive, to keep it alive, day after day. I know Singh Babbar, a man who experienced all that, and yet I have two stories about him. What happened to the rest of them? 30,000 people were murdered, butchered, and killed in Delhi. What are their stories? And what about us? We want to be the solution. We want to fix Sikhi. We want to save Sikhi. This is again a question for us नौजवान. कैसे कहते हैं कि Sikhi नहीं बचाना? अल्लाह सेक्टर बन जाइए. Sikhi बचाने वास्ते सेक्टर बनना जरूरी है. जो Sikhi बचाने सेक्टर बने सेक्टर कौन से Sikhi कितना बचे? पर Sikhi ने जाना कितनी क्योंकि गुरु गोबिंद सिंह महाराज जी Sikhi गुरु गोबिंद सिंह महाराज का पंथ है. Have no doubt that either. But जो असी Sikhi ने कष्ट करना पहले साड़ी जिम्मेवारी बंदी आप से बनी है. And संत जी तीन गल्लां करते सी प्रचार करने वाले नशे छड्डो बाणी पढ़ो अमृत छको give up drugs read Gurbani take Amrit and that gives you the perfect revolution. A man who is free of drugs has self-control. A man who is free of drugs and intoxications knows who he is, has self-respect, has focus and realises what's going on around him. A man who reads Gurbani has love for the Guru, understands who the Guru is, has that strength that Gurbani provides him. Taking Amrit means you've already given your head for the Guru. There is no path backwards, only forwards. These are the three ingredients of making the perfect revolutionary. This is how Sons of Nelson created the grassroots movement. We must continue. Our responsibility is to pick up the yardstick of people like Bhai Jaswant Singh Kalra. We must do what we can. We must teach others about our history. We must teach ourselves about history. We must take that and walk towards Guru Granth Sahib Ji Maharaj. So what can we do? What can I do? If you don't know the answer to that question, dig deep. Look deep within yourself. This is not to say any of us can be another Anok Singh Babbar. That's Maharaj Ji Moj, and Maharaj Ji's Kripa. But you know what? We can at least go home and teach our kids. Do our kids know who Anok Singh is? Probably not. But they know who Superman is. They know who Spider-Man is. But they won't know who Anok Singh is. They won't know who Dilawar Singh is. We want to do something for Sikhi. We want to take forward the Panth, serve the Panth. Let's join with the Panth first. Let's join with the Nand Prasad. Let's join with the case of Nishan Sahib. And again, कहीं ना कहीं अमृत की गल करी जाती है. गुरु साहब ने हमारे दरबार में अमृत की गल करनी चाहिए. बहुत कट करते हैं, especially among Sikhs. This isn't a bad thing. There was a time in April, Vaisakhi 1984. Sant Ji said that there were 40,000 people that had come in one day. एक दिन संत कहते कि 40,000 पुराने ने मर चुके. कि कंगे नहीं लगते सी, ककार नहीं मिलते सी. This is a movement that they created. So हाथ जोड़ बेनती from ourselves and from all the नौजवान, responsibility is on us now. We must do whatever we can do, whatever shape, way or form. These stories are still there, these people are still there, the victims are still there. 150,000 men who made impotent are being raped and tortured, electricity passed through their private parts. 150,000 men. he will never ever admit to it. Who's going to tell this story? So, बहुत दफ़ा बहुत गलती हुई थी आपने अनजान बच्चे से उनकी माफ़ कर लेना बहुत दफ़ा if I've said any mistakes please do forgive me वाहिगुरु जी का खालसा वाहिगुरु जी की फतेह